Good afternoon. My name is Martin Sandren, and I'm here today to talk about the State of Identity Conference pre-talk. And with me, I have Andre, as well uh, as as Patrick as guests, and we are all looking forward to the
To the end of the flu epidemic.
Yes, that's a very good idea. But also the conference, which hopefully will not have to wait until the conference for the end of flu epidemic. I'm very happy to be speaking at the State of Identity Conference in Utrecht. This is something new that we are trying out. I was speaking at the conference in Helsinki last year, but now we're also in the Netherlands and in Sweden as well. So, Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, sure. Patrick van der Valk. I've been in cybersecurity since 2006. Entrepreneur, had a couple of cybersecurity companies. The last one I founded actually is with Andre, who is also in the call, Sonic Bee, where Andre is still working and I am now just a shareholder. And yeah, that's basically in a nutshell my background.
Very nice. And of course, you have a previous connection from another firm.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we have a previous connection amongst the three of us. We have all been colleagues working at Nixu, DNV Cyber at this day. So yeah, that's true as well.
So Andre, do you want to say a few words about your background?
Yeah, background is very diverse, but I'm from a business economic side. Used to be working as a tax auditor for the tax department, fighting fraud, and fighting fraud has been my how you say it, introduction to access control. And I've been working in identity and access management for 25 years now, and the last 15 years as a consultant. And that's where we met often. Conferences and companies, so like to be here present as one of the presenters as well.
Sounds good. So Patrick, you will be running the day, being the stage manager and the presenter. So are there any topics that you think is especially interesting? It's a very loaded agenda with lots and lots of interesting talks.
Yeah, and what you basically see, we did this in Helsinki last year as well, in September, our first edition of State of Identity. And of course, if you compare it to like 4 years ago, there's always a lot about AI and agentic access. And first couple of talks I was myself, it was like, oh no, not again, but it's everywhere and things happen so fast. It must be also on the agenda. So that will be on the agenda, as well as other topics as well. So where are we currently with the digital wallet? How will you use a digital wallet? So Jacob was talking about that. So like it's 2030. What would your life look like with your digital wallet? What can you actually do with it? So she's going to talk about it. Then we also have like people talking about like, do we now already see identity and access management as a real C-level topic? How far are we with that? And if not, why isn't it a C-level topic yet? So yeah, it's like really we touch a lot of things, and there's always like also speakers that are going to talk about like the practice. So okay, cool, all this stuff that's going on, and this future that is kind of unfolding with AI. But hey, we're still managing people in Excel sheets. So there's a huge gap. How are we going to bridge that gap? So all in all, like really diverse program that we will have, and I'll try to put everything together and make sense of it in between the talks.
Yeah, I'm really interested in Jakoba's talk because he is usually an excellent source for just keeping an eye on what's happening in the wallets. And I'm originally from Sweden, where of course we've had bank ID for a long time. It's been commonly used for more than 20 years now, and you could argue that in Sweden it's potentially used for a bit too many things, as you use the same ID to book a training time at the gym, or to identify yourself as the parent of your kid for their football practice. that you use for example, making a very big financial transaction in your bank. But it's going to be very interesting to see not only the kind of the individual consumer, but also the B2B part when that takes off. Of course, we have some extremely interesting initiatives there as well here in the Netherlands, not at least the all the port set up with that idea. So Andre, what you are going to speak, so I guess you can give us a bit of insight into the topic of your talk.
Yeah, I have yet to come up with a presentation, but I would like to call my presentation Future State of Access. People who know me know that I'm not very much an identity person, and I don't like the fact that our industry is called identity industry because it's all about access. So that's my main focus. And what I will try to explain is a few topics that are relevant at the moment. Like Patrick, like you mentioned as well, the last few months we've been overflown with a lot of information about AI agents and the risks and the possibilities and opportunities that are presented by these agents. And how do we control the risks of these agents having access to all kinds of data and other agents? So that will be one of the topics, and I'll be discussing the topic of the confused deputy. That's an old access control issue. The confused deputy used to be an old computer system with some authorizations that has been instructed by someone with less authorizations to use more authorizations. So the deputy is just listening into someone who's calling to the deputy, and deputy will respond on the request. So if you have an agent with a lot of authorizations, then anyone with less authorization could abuse the agent to do more than the person itself should be able to do. So that's the confused deputy issue. I have to yet to get into it in depth, but that's the case that I'd like to explain during my presentation. And the issue is, of course, in our industry, we've been kind of comfortable in using the traditional way of doing identity and access management, like join and move and leave a process, role-based access control. Well, that's bread and butter in this industry for 20, 25 years, and developments are slow. Now you're going to zero trust. 5 years ago, zero trust came about, and we try to develop that, but customers are still lagging in implementation of zero trust environments. And so, but it's kind of steady going on. The developments have been kind of steady. So in IGA, in RBAC, we still do the same way as 20 years ago. Zero trust. We're using federation style of access for 5 to 10 years now. It's kind of steady, but the last 2 or 3 months, developments in AI are hectic. It's hard to keep up with the developments. How do we do MCPs, spiffy identities? How do you go about UTCP? And well, it's too much, and it's all happening all at once. Now we got this interesting Claude bots phenomena. How do we cope with that? And what we see happening is that traditional IT is developing slowly and implementing in the business side. And now we see at businesses, at companies, customers, we see them using AI platforms, but without a lot of development before that. So it's being used before we even got to know that it's existing. So it's so new, it's so much development going on that it's hard to keep up with the developments. And for us as identity access control experts, it's hard. So I can imagine it's even harder for the companies that are faced with the challenges of AI. So that will be kind of my topic, Martin. It's about looking at old phenomena like the confused deputy and what does it mean for now. So that will be my main topic.
Very interesting. So I actually have a similar topic than I was speaking just before you, but my talk will be a little bit more going to the kind of the practical hands-on right now, what you should do as a product lead or a responsible for IM, and try to understand where we are today. And of course, like many things, it's a journey. I think in the case of AI, we are still trying to figure out what types of controls make sense. You of course have the concept, so zero trust concept applies to AI as well. You have least privilege. That also is a very important concept. And you also, I think, one of the big differences is that we really see, and this is something that has kind of creeping up, but is really accelerating, is the need to have time-bound authorizations. So historically, from very back, you gave a service account lots of privileges, and then you gave it to the system. You can, of course, do it that way, but that creates a quite large security gap. So what you would often with AI is either have delegation where you take the role of the user, but in many cases that is not enough, or sometimes far too much. So instead, you want to give out rights to do exactly what the AI needs when it needs it, and potentially then set in some form of a guardrails and potentially even human in the loop in some certain cases. But that's of course always a a question. And like you said, I think it's very similar in the situation, of course, also to what we had 5 to 10 years ago when we saw the rise of shadow IT. So the business wants to have IT done faster than what IT can produce it. So they go out and use their credit card and buy SIS solutions. In this case, you can have citizen developers who download, MCP server and an AI, and then buy a bunch of credits, and then head out to the into the wild world. And that's of course something you need to then look at user training, and but also potentially looking at how can you discover these MCP servers, and at least use a little bit of perhaps not zero trust, but not a huge amount of trust for everything. That just because you're inside, you can do all. As we see, that's also something very closely connected to modern cybersecurity. To try to the best way to stop attackers is actually to try to insert lots of little speed bumps and be ready to try to figure out when someone is trying to run fast over the speed bumps. So that is, of course, then a very can be a lot more challenging in an environment where there's lots of highly privileged MCP servers sitting out on people's workstations or servers.
Don't you think, like Martin, what you just said, like in the future, that I'm the marketing manager, I need to create a marketing strategy, but I need some information, some guidance coming from C-level documents. What actually are their plans, and are there any mutations there? So basically, my AI goes in and requests a one-time permission to get access to only the relevant information for me making my marketing strategy. Another AI actually is looking at what I want, why I want it, and then gives me a one-time access. That's actually what you were also just saying. I get like a one-time access for my AI to access that information. And if should any updates come in the future, the other AI agent will push it to me or to my system. Would that mean, so I'm going to ask you both, wouldn't that mean that somewhere in the future, access is way more fine-grained because I don't need access anymore to whole documents? The AI agent is actually giving me the bits and pieces that I, as a user, need, and nothing more.
Correct. So this is kind of if you look at, this is a little bit more advanced than what you could expect to have in place today, or let's say with the next fiscal year or so. But it's clear that this is kind of the model. One of the big security problems is exactly this, that we need to start having a much better control. So the classical example is that if you have an AI, it should only really be able to access the systems during the time of a change management window. But this is another good example where you have more of the data side. So you have an AI agent that needs to read rather sensitive executive information to be able to make sure that create a marketing strategy and then have it updated. That is not something it should have consistently, but it needs it at a certain amount of time to talk about the formal access. But then you need the engine to host all these policies. So a lot of the the fine grain authorization solutions are now kind of pivoting to get into this space.
It's not just fine grained, it's also more dynamic.
Yeah.
So where we used to have the traditional role-based access control, where people get a role and based on the role you get authorizations, it's kind of simple model, but it's also lacking in a lot of dynamics and a lot of context awareness that doesn't exist in RBAC. And we see that with a new policy-based access control, the federation style of access, and the AI agent being, how you say it, exponential growth or getting more dynamics, we see that this is getting more important. And that's what this means is, for me, is that you have to define your capabilities. You have to define your baselines, your policies. You have to have your governance in place before you start with these kind of things. If you have your AI agent doing reading your strategic documents, yeah, perhaps that document is not even at the correct status, or you're not allowed to do that. And if your agent can do it, then probably you get a data breach, whatever. And that's, we need to have our governance in place before we start using. But that's too late, because we don't have AI governance, and everywhere we see AI being used, being implemented, being abused, perhaps. So we are too late as an industry. We're too late as governance, as businesses. Even businesses who don't have their IM in place are using AI. So how is that possible? So we see what you mentioned before, Patrick. There's an enormous gap between what's happening now and where people are working at the moment. So even if their journal move leave version is not in order, they still manual perhaps. There are companies that are already working with the new AI stuff, because it's, well, you could say it's FOMO, fear of missing out, but that's not the best business case for using AI. So we have new features, but you don't have the capabilities to control it. There are new developments, but there are no governance in place. So a lot of new threats without being identified yet. So that's an interesting development that we're faced now as an industry. We see that developments are faster. In my opinion, the last year we had more developments in this area, in identity and access management, than the 20 year before. So it's accelerating at the pace that we couldn't imagine for 2 years. So for me, this is challenging. And it's still one big discovery of what can we find, how can we get it in control. For this, what you mentioned about the human in the loop, that's one of the principles in AI. That a human should be end responsible. I have already been discussing this in ID Pro, that's our body of our knowledge area. There's Yves Mahler he's responsible for in Kantara for UMA, user managed access. That could be, there's also an old protocol that can be used to implement perhaps some kind of the human in the loop features that are needed now to get control back from the AI.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and it's an area where you both have very kind of long-ranging ideas, and I think also there's a big need for just some practical advice on what people are actually using. So let's see if we manage to provide both these pieces. I'm also really interested in a little bit about another big topic, of course, with the geopolitical instability and need to increase resilience. So the talk from Jerry Reinbeck about how to combine prevention and recovery. You still have a lot of attacks by ransomware teams, and I think this is something we all need to figure out how to kind of handle. How do you make sure that you discover the attackers and slow them down before they get where they spread horizontally or vertically towards the privileged? And worst comes to worst, how do you recover your environment? So I think that's a very interesting one as well. So there's lots and lots of very interesting content to be offered. So I hope that you will join us at the conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Any last words, Patrick?
No, maybe just like a fun fact for people watching. So we created a poll on cybersecurity in Nederland. Basically, when it came out like a couple of weeks that all those open claw agents were having like a good time together, like exchanging all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So basically we said, so those personal AI agents can now exchange data autonomously. When will the first major AI driven data leak occur? Basically those agents talking to each other. And 93% of all the people in the poll said it's actually going to be this year already. So
Well, I would say that the first big leaks have kind of already happened. So the first thing that tended to happen was people who were a little bit too perhaps service oriented and ambitious. So we have seen in a number of enterprises where really sensitive data has been happily sent into the a public AI account, and then all the data went into the learning model of the AI. And the interesting part here is that, of course, no one knows if it actually still is, rotating somewhere in the learning models. This, for example, network setups or conditional access is another. Microsoft Centra's conditional access. It's another thing that you really don't want to put into people's public AI's learning models, because, of course, you can then find the weak spots. So those parts are there, but like you said, most likely we're going to see cases where also actual personal data are being shared. So, Andre, do you have any final words?
I'm looking forward to the conference because it's not a lot of conferences at the moment, and especially not around my office. It's close by, and I'm looking forward to seeing old friends again. And we've been missing each other a lot because everything is now happening online. So I'm glad to see people in the flesh again. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you, Patrick, for organizing it.
you're welcome.
And also the talk by Robert Garshkamp is going to be really interesting about sovereign identity. It's also it's funny when you're in IAM because a lot of things, they kind of go in cycles. That if you look 5 years ago, no one was, well, a few people were talking about sovereign identity and so on, but I don't think that if you look at the bigger picture, no one was really paying attention. Other than extreme examples where you have like government agencies and other things. But today, a municipality would be a little bit like, is it really a good idea to use a US backed product for my email or for my IDP? So really an interesting field that has kind of had a huge resurgence. So
yeah, and Martin, I really hope that the takeaway for a lot of people will be that you definitely need to invest very fast in identity and access management being the foundation of your whole cybersecurity and like the first layer of defense, I would argue. And we will give a lot of arguments why that needs to happen as well. So if you're like working for a company or an organization where awareness is still a little bit low, we will give you loads and loads of ideas, use cases, and other stuff to bring back to your organization to tell them why it is so important now to step up your identity and access management.
Sounds good. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in just a few short weeks. And until then, have a great time.
Thanks, Martin. Bye-bye.